let's say LSU pulls off the upset of the century, and they beat Alabama. Where's Bama go in the next one?
5 slot.
Yeah.
Like, come on now, you know daggone well. Like, they're not going to drop completely out of this conversation.
Oh, no. Like,
I'll
just
be honest.
I wonder if they even drop that far. I mean.
Okay, they'll have, like, it feels obligatory that you have to remove them from the top 4 because these two teams cannot both be in the top 4 after this weekend's results. It's a hunch at best, but it's just something that you look at and make sense of given the current state of things in that top 4.
You think an undefeated Notre Dame right now would stand above a one-loss Alabama with that one loss coming to the number 3 team in the country?
Off GP? Yeah.
Off GP, I have no idea what that even means.
Yeah, what is that?
A general principle? Like, yeah.
Off general principle. Okay, I thought maybe that was cool kid.
My
lingo,
God, that counts as a Harvard reference. Put him on the board.
Now,
yeah, wait.
Somebody back me up on GP, please. No.
Yeah, really. We'll open this up to the room. Anybody? God, we out.
Whatever, nerds.
Yeah,
for the people.
Yeah, no, Mike had no idea. Mike's younger than I am, so still a millennial. So you realistically think, where do you think Alabama falls if they lose?
If Alabama loses, I mean, see, you're assuming, so Alabama loses LSU, and then we're assuming everyone else holds serve for the weekend.
Correct,
there, right?
So in my mind, Clemson shifts to 1, right?
Yeah.
Clemson shifts to 1, LSU would shift to 2, Notre Dame would shift to 3, Michigan would shift to 4. Would you put Georgia ahead of
Nah.
Wow.
Nah, I can't do that.
Well, and you know what? That's the thing. To say they held serve would mean that Georgia beat Kentucky.
Correct.
Like, you're going to put Georgia above Alabama then because Alabama would have a loss then. And if Georgia goes out there, and it depends on how they look, too. Like, we can't not take that into account as much as the committee doesn't factor in margin of victory.
Right, and, like, that's a really weird – because it is so much you can't necessarily quantitatively just assess. Like, it was a 30-point win, so therefore it is a better win than a 20-point win. But I think you have to, again, use your eyes then and just say it was – wire to wire, there was not a chance in hell that like anybody was going to sneak into that. Like there was no upset possibility at all.
Thoughts on Kentucky is the question being asked, and we've talked a lot about Kentucky. I will say that I was stunned that Kentucky was number 9 on this thing coming in. If you haven't seen the rankings, you're just tuning in on Twitter. Really quick to get you caught up. Alabama 1, Clemson 2, LSU 3, Notre Dame 4. Not a lot of surprises there. Michigan 5. Georgia 6, again, still not a lot of surprises. Oklahoma 7. It gets a little surprising to people with Washington State at 8, Kentucky at 9, Ohio State at 10. So I'm still a little surprised for me because I'll go back to what Trevor was mentioning earlier. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the body of work. And the body of work and the eye test for Kentucky, particularly over the last couple of weeks, it's hard for me to see a team that barely beat Vandy, as much as I have my Vandy bias, and it's hard for me to see a team that also needed a walk-off win over Mizzou, not a particularly good Mizzou team, to find themselves considered to be the number 9 team in the country.
But I think it's about the magnitude of the loss, right? Like, think of the 2 losses that Ohio State and Kentucky specifically have on their schedule. We know Ohio State's. We have gone over that a dozen times. They done got doors by the Boilermakers. But Kentucky's was on the road at TAMU, and that's never an easy place to go into and get a win. Granted, Benny Snell only got like 12, 13 carries, and I'll never understand why that was the case. But all that to say, it's the magnitude of the loss. And again, I recognize the committee is not necessarily taking into account the margin of victory, but you looked at those 2 comparative losses, and you're like, okay, that's not necessarily one we want to put too much weight on versus Ohio State's just waxing.
What's been interesting about this year in college football particularly, I think we can all agree, is there are really 2 great football teams so far. Alabama and Clemson are the great football teams. And even Clemson at times has had some hiccups where I don't think they've looked as impressive as we think. You've got 2 great teams in college football. And then you've got a whole bunch of guys that are just bundled together. And some of it looks good sometimes. Some of it looks bad sometimes. I have a hard time in my mind justifying an LSU offense that's looked the way it's looked as number 3 in the country, a Michigan offense that frankly has looked the way it's looked as number 5, a Georgia team that has not stepped up and played to its potential number 6. I have a hard time looking at these teams and saying there's a clear-cut answer right now of who the 3rd and 4th best teams are, and that's why I think more than ever this year, moving forward, we're going to see the committee make massive changes to this as we get more body of work.
But I'll tell you, man, like the same reason why you're sort of tearing these teams off. Like Clemson and Alabama, and even Clemson not so much as Alabama, week to week look daggone good. Those one sort of off chances that a team can pick off somebody else are the exact reason why they're going to stick exactly with what they're doing. Because when you get to the 14 playoff, one thing can happen and Bama's out and gets doorsed on the first weekend.
I think all of this is well and good. I think the idea that Alabama and Clemson are in a tier together is laughable. Alabama's here.
Okay.
Clemson's defense is great. They're working through a freshman quarterback right now who at times looks at like
a freshman quarterback.
Everything in Clemson's offense right now is towards the sidelines. You got a kid with a strong arm, so they run a bunch of out-breaking routes. And you throw them there with athletes in space. And Hunter Renfrow has a million catches. And then you'll play action deep 2 or 3 times a game, and you'll catch someone slipping.
And we do have to acknowledge the fact that, look, there's a real problem. Not problem, but let's say there's got to be a real puckered moment for Clemson fans about Trevor Lawrence's health, right? I mean, you don't have a backup situation here. You've already seen him go down a couple of times. He's not doing the best job, as the broadcast really smartly pointed out last week when we were watching it.
Right.
He's not doing the best job of protecting his body. He's not getting rid of the ball quickly. There's a point where he's taking a ton of hits. If I'm a Clemson fan, my worry, they point out every single week, is that they've got guys that have zero experience behind them.
But no, Chase Bryce did come in and do a little job for him when it came to Syracuse, man. He was not terrible. Like, I think with that rep that he had there and going forward, Clemson has a little less lemon booty going forward. Like, you're fine with it.
Man. And Josh points out on Twitter, that's why Etienne needs more carries. I'm surprised that hasn't happened.
Because I was getting ready to say it. Thank you. Yes, Travis Etienne. Get that man the ball.
Yeah, Clemson's weird to me because they can't line. And this is the problem Notre Dame's had this season, too. Like, I'm not saying this from a place of judgment just on them, but you've got a couple of teams like them that cannot just line up and knock people off the ball.
Right.
I'm hoping Notre Dame looked more promising against Navy, but there's such a talent mismatch. Both those teams, just the way they structure it scheme-wise, giving Etienne a bunch of touches, like, yeah, they're going to be touches. They're not going to be downhill. It's going to be jet sweeps and all that stuff. Because with this team, like, I'm telling you, at Boston College, November 10th, that game would scare the hell out of me. If that's the one that scares me if I'm a Clemson fan, because that's a Boston College team that's stout on both sides. Their offensive line is one of the better ones in the country, let alone the ACC.
And they got a 245-pound back that can run like a 4-4. Like, he's a big joker. He can roll.